Hello, thank you for your interest in the ICT calculator. In this video tutorial, you will learn how to use the calculator in just 5 easy steps. But before we begin, notice that there are numerous worksheets. This is due to the variety of ICT device categories covered by the calculator. These include desktop computers, laptops, computer monitors, scanners, copiers, fax machines, multifunction devices, and printers. Each of these 8 groups has its own worksheet. Right now, we are on the first worksheet, Basics, which offers information about the calculator, like its affiliation with the EU project GPP 2020 and the organizational partners that have helped produce it. The two main worksheets you will use to compare devices are titled Inputs and Results. Please bear in mind when using the calculator that the decimal separator is a comma, not a point. Now let's begin the tutorial in which we will use the calculator to show us the energy, economic, and emission savings of 2 example devices, desktop computers and multifunction devices. Step 1. We begin with the worksheet titled Inputs. First, we select the country where the device will be used, and we will select Austria for our example. This step is important because each country has its own average electricity mix and therefore a different amount of greenhouse gas emissions per kilowatt hour. Once we have chosen our country, the costs for 1 kilowatt hour and the amount of greenhouse gas emissions per kilowatt hour are automatically provided by the calculator. If we do not want to use the default values because we have our own, more precise values, we can go to the last worksheet titled General Assumptions. Here we can include the values we wish to use. Step 2. Once we are satisfied with the figures of the upper part of the worksheet, we can start to include the figures in the center with details of our purchase order and how we will use the devices. First, we include in the orange cells the number of appliances we wish to buy. For purposes of an example, let's see what the calculator reveals about buying 1,000 desktop computers. Once we have included the number of units, more information is needed. We must also enter the portion of units that are turned off at night, and the calculator gives us a list of options from which to choose. For our example, we choose 75%. The calculator also asks us to enter the portion of units with sleep settings or an enabled power mode. Again, we can choose from a list of options. This time we choose 50%. Now, let's say we also want to buy 100 multifunction devices, and we use the laser monochrome option. For this kind of device, we must also enter the speed at which it operates, which is expressed in number of images per minute. We choose a speed between 21 and 44 images per minute. Now we have completed the input worksheet, but before we go to the results worksheet, we have to go to another input worksheet specific to each category of device. Step 3. First, let's go to the worksheet for desktop computers called Computer Calcs. Notice that some of the cells on this sheet are orange. In these cells, we either review the figures already present or we add new figures. First, we have the computer power input in watts. So here we include the figures for the watt consumption of the different modes of the computer: idle mode, sleep mode, and off mode. We include new values for the low carbon solution, and we change the values for the benchmark. We recommend that you use for the benchmark an average device available on the market, or figures for a lesser energy efficient device according to Energy Star, or the values from your last contract if it is no more than 2 years old. In this example, we will consider a benchmark of a 16 RAM desktop computer which consumes 39.1 watts in idle mode, 1.7 watts in sleep mode, and 0.4 watts when turned off. For the low-carbon solution, you can take values from your current tender if a low-carbon solution was provided, or if you would like to use the calculator to monitor the results of the low-carbon tender. If you use the calculator before tendering, you can also take the values of a very energy-efficient Energy Star rated product. For this example, our low-carbon solution will consume 12.9 watts in idle mode, 0.9 watts in sleep mode, and 0.4 watts while off. At the end of the worksheet, we have to include the lifetime of the computer, or the number of years that the machines will be in use by your organization. Additionally, this worksheet includes operating hours. In 1 year, there are 8,760 hours. This table shows you how many hours the device spends in the different modes if it is A, power managed and turned off after work, not power managed and turned off, power managed and left running, and not power managed and left running. Based on the figures we have entered on the main input worksheet, we get a weighted scenario for our devices. For example, if we have 0% turned off and power managed, we get 8,760 hours in the idle mode. We recommend that you do not make any changes to the figures for operating hours. However, if you are procuring for an organization that usually has a 30-hour work week instead of a 40-hour work week, it might be sensible to change the scenario. Now we have completed the worksheet Computer Calcs, and because we are also purchasing multifunction devices, we go now to the worksheet MFD Calcs. Step 4. Here again, we have to enter the typical annual electricity consumption per device. The manufacturer usually offers this value. You can also find it in the Energy Star database, at least for those appliances that have an Energy Star rating. In this example, we will use a laser monochrome multifunction device that produces 30 images per minute. The benchmark that we will use has an annual electricity consumption of 151 kilowatt hours per year, while the low-carbon solution consumes just 78. Again, we recommend that you use for the benchmark an average device available on the market, or figures for a lesser energy efficient device according to Energy Star, or the values from your last contract if it is no more than 3 years old in the case of multifunction devices. Afterwards, add the number of years that the devices will be used by your organization. In this example, we use 6 years. We have now completed the worksheet MFD Calcs. After having completed all the input worksheets, we can go now to the results worksheet. Step 5. Review results. Now that we are looking at the results worksheet, we see all the information that we entered into the input sheets. In the first column, we see the different devices we are procuring. In the second column, the quantity of devices that we will purchase, and in the third column, the lifetime of the devices. In the light green fields, we find the figures for energy consumption and greenhouse gas emissions produced by the benchmark. In the dark green fields, we see the energy consumption and greenhouse gas emissions estimated to be produced by the low-carbon solution. In the blue fields, we see the savings of energy and greenhouse gas emissions if you buy the low-carbon solution instead of the benchmark. Based on our inputs for desktop computers and multifunction devices, we find the following results. If we purchase 1,000 desktop computers calibrated to the benchmark, we will consume 90,991 kilowatt hours of energy per year, using about 7.8 tons of oil equivalent annually, and creating nearly 15 metric tons of CO2 emissions each year. Over a 5-year lifetime, these devices would require more than 39 tons of oil equivalent in energy and would produce more than 73 metric tons of CO2. Comparatively, we can see that choosing the low-carbon solution produces significant energy savings. The per year energy consumption is just 31,849 kilowatt hours, and the total lifetime CO2 emissions are just 25.7 metric tons, or less than 14 tons of oil equivalent. This saves us over 59,062 kilowatt hours of energy per year, and nearly 300,000 kilowatt hours over the course of 5-year device lifetime, which results in 47.6 metric tons less CO2 emissions from use of these devices. In this scenario, the low-carbon solution could save an organization more than €32,000 in energy costs over 5 years. For our multifunction devices, we see that the benchmark would require 15,121 kilowatt hours per year, or 1.3 tons of oil equivalents, and would generate 2.4 tons per year of CO2 emissions. Over the 6-year lifetime of these devices, nearly 8 tons of oil equivalents would be required, and 14.6 tons of CO2 emissions would be generated. We can see in this instance that the low-carbon solution requires just 7,800 kilowatt hours of energy per year, and thus over the lifetime saves 43,929 kilowatt hours in energy usage, avoids more than 7 tons of CO2 emissions, and saves nearly €5,000 in energy costs. In the bottom row, we see the sums of all the figures, which tell us overall savings for the entire purchase order. So now we know how much energy and CO2 emissions we can save if we choose a low-carbon solution compared to the benchmark. We hope that you will find the calculator easy to work with. Notice that on our website there are more calculators for the product groups lighting, cars, and energy that might be useful to you. Each calculator has an accompanying tutorial on how to use it. If you have any questions about or comments on the calculator, you can find our contact information on the website for the European Commission Green Public Procurement 2020 project. Good luck and goodbye.